Welcome back to another episode of the Family Matters podcast. We are absolutely thrilled and honored to have our next guest join us from Washington, D.C., Senator Steve Daines. Senator, thank you so much for joining the show this morning.
Very glad to be with you.
Yeah, Senator, on the Family Matters podcast, one of the things I like to ask our guests, especially those serving, is what led you to serve? How did God put that calling on your heart?
Well, you frame the question well as it relates to a calling, and I truly believe every vocation is a calling, whether you are a painter, a plumber, electrician, a lawyer, a homemaker. It is a calling. In fact, the word vocation is a good Latin root there from voco, which means we get the word vocal. It's calling, and so. Political service is just yet another calling. I believe God calls us to our work regardless of what it is. But in fact, I was reading through the book back, this was 2010, when I was in the software business with Greg Gianforte, our governor. We were building a tech company together called Right Now Technologies there in Bozeman. And I was reading a book called The Call by Os Guinness, actually. And that was instrumental in kind of helping my sweet wife, Cindy, we married 39 years, think through maybe we should be headed in this next chapter and season of life into public service and in the mysteries of God, of how that all works out. That may be the right direction to go. And that was really the beginning of pursuing that, and then had an election, and grateful that we won. And here we are.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Os Guinness. The Family Foundation has had Os Guinness as a speaker at one of our events, and just a little known factoid: you actually emceed one of our events as well years ago, and so we're grateful for your support and the relationship you've had with the Montana Family Foundation for many years. So thank you for that.
Well, I've been a big fan for many years, and Jeff Laszlowski's a very close friend, and I'm speaking of Oz. This is kind of the Os Guinness fan club here. Oz was back in Montana a few years ago, and he actually stayed with us.
Oh, wow!
We have a nice upstairs bedroom that we got to have Oz stay with us, and he's one of the true great thinkers, Christian thinkers. He's almost a modern day C.S. Lewis, in my opinion, of just deep intellectual capacity, and able to frame the issues of the day here, and to be a motivator in terms of taking action as men and women of faith, addressing some of the significant cultural issues that we face in our country and around the world.
Yes. Well, and speaking of significant cultural issues, and there are many, and I know you keep a pulse on things going on in Montana in a very large way. How does representing the state of Montana shape your approach to your work in Washington, D.C. because of Montana's uniqueness?
Well, ultimately, it is what shapes what I do back here, because you never ever want to forget that I'm only here because, as the Declaration of Independence talks about, because of the consent of the governed. The people of Montana provided their consent via an election. That's who I work for. That's who I serve. In fact, in our office, we have one of our operating principles, and it comes out of Mark 10:45, and that principle is: we are not here to be served, but to serve. Public service is about serving, and this is why we had a Revolutionary War. The people were tired of having to serve the king. Our representative form of government, our constitutional, our republic, is one where the elected leaders serve the people, and that tips the whole thing upside down from where monarchies and what the Brits had when we lived under a ruler, the king. King George, and that's tipped upside down with the way our country operates, and one of the great American ideals of we the people. We have delegated the power to the people, so I serve because the people said I could through an election, but we're here to serve them and not to be served.
Right, right. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, and what's amazing about that to me, I always think about the Boston Tea Party and how some of these events set that Revolutionary War in motion. And we're talking at that time of a tax of about 3% on tea, and that was enough to outrage people. And I think when you put that in context nowadays, people have become really accustomed to much higher taxes. But I think what's more important there is where are those tax dollars going, which brings me to my next question about Planned Parenthood and some of the efforts there in Washington, D.C. to defund Planned Parenthood, because a lot of tax money has been going to that organization. What's going on with that, Senator?
Well, I strongly believe that taxpayer dollars should never be used to fund abortion under any circumstance, and that Planned Parenthood must be fully defunded. One of the big fights right now on Capitol Hill is whether or not these Biden era temporary COVID ACA subsidies should be extended or not. I've been very clear that I can't support that because those subsidies do not have the Hyde Amendment protections. And the Hyde Amendment protections do not allow federal tax dollars to be spent on elective abortions. In fact, this month I urged OPM to end taxpayer-funded abortions in congressional health plans. Members of Congress and their staff should never be allowed to exploit taxpayer dollars to fund abortions.
Well, thank you for your work on that. Senator, we passed a similar Hyde Amendment style legislation in Montana back in 2023, and that was enjoined in the courts, which is not an uncommon story here in Montana, as you are well aware. I would be interested in your thoughts on judicial reform here in Montana. We have the Montana legislature, the closest branch of government to the people. We pass these good policies, and it seems like the courts have been used as a super veto on some of these common sense legislation, like a Hyde Amendment that prevents state taxpayer dollars from going to abortions, elective abortions.
Yeah, well, I've watched the shift in our Montana politics, and particularly who's elected, occur over the time I've been in Washington. In fact, when I first ran for the U.S. House in Montana, this is in 2012, there was only one statewide elected Republican, and the rest were all Democrats. And anymore, generally, party affiliation is a pretty clear proxy for where you stand on fundamental issues of life and marriage and so forth. But it was one Republican and then 7 Democrats. Today, for the first time since statehood, going back to 1889, we have an all Republican lineup, not only in our federal delegation, but all of our statewide constitutional elected officers that serve in Helena. The last hill we have to climb in Montana to make sure our elected officials match where I'll call it the political center gravity of Montana is our state Supreme Court. They are so far out of touch and so far left of where I think the needle is in Montana today. And the reason that's the case is because the state Supreme Court elected officials are quote, nonpartisan. So the problem is Republicans now, or excuse me, Montanans are generally a Republican majority type voting bloc. But when it comes to the state Supreme Court, they don't know which is the Republican, which is the Democrat. They're quote nonpartisan. Well, the reality is the trial lawyers then get all the money behind the more liberal justice, and so Montanans don't always see the reality. They're influenced more by the money spent in these elections, and that's why we have such a liberal court. It's one of the most important elections coming up here in 26 and in 28 and 30 and going forward is these state Supreme Court justices. We've got to move them back to center right and away from the center left. And exactly what you said, a lot of the great work that Governor Gianforte is doing and the state legislatures that are pro-life are then being stopped by this liberal state Supreme Court.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I guess my next question, let's stay on the topic of where our taxpayer dollars are going. I think something that surprised many Montanans, surprised me, when President Trump took office for the second time, there was a big push on USAID and uncovering where these USAID funds were going, what it was paying for, abortion procedures overseas, transgender education in Pakistan, all these crazy ideological notions were being funded by this program, and it was shocking. What's going on with USAID, and what should we know, Senator?
Well, first of all, very thankful for the 24 election, where Montanans overwhelmingly supported President Trump, and Montanans overwhelmingly voted for Tim Sheehy versus John Tester. And Tim Sheehy's been a wonderful addition to our delegation. He's a great battle buddy to have. That we are aligned in virtually every area, every vote. Tim and I see it the same way, and it's wonderful because that then complements. We have Congressman Troy Downing and Congressman Ryan Zinke. We work very, very well as like the Blue Angels flying in tight formation here representing Montana. It's nice. When John Tester was back here, we would literally cancel each other's votes almost every time. And finally, Montana saw through that and soundly elected Tim Sheehy. But now with President Trump, he comes to office, and if you remember, he puts Elon Musk in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and they started digging into where these USAID dollars were being spent, literally project by project, and it was just horrible. Some of the things they uncovered, and you think about our federal government, we're $38 trillion in debt, and yet USAID was spending taxpayer dollars on these woke policies on transgenders, promoting abortion in places like the Balkans, the Caribbean, Uganda, $3 million for Iraqi Sesame Street. I mean, just made no sense. And by exposing that, I think there was a lot of outrage, and rightfully so, of the American people. And so one of his first actions was to cut those items out. And there's still a lot more work to do, but they're off to a great start stopping. And I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, so I have the opportunity to travel around the world advocating on behalf of Montanans as relates to getting access for our ag producers, whether it's cattle, wheat, barley, pulse crops, and so forth. But I also engage then with foreign leaders. And I'll tell you, many of these foreign leaders in much of the world were horrified by what Joe Biden's White House was doing, promoting their woke policies, flying the pride flag at our embassies in some of these Muslim countries, just an affront to their culture and their faith, and was really harming America and our interests overseas by promoting these terrible woke policies. So thank God for President Trump, for Marco Rubio, for now getting us course corrected and getting on a much better path here, back to more aligned with American true values.
Yes, yes. Well, and speaking of an affront to traditional values, we've had, and I'm sure you followed this as well, but speaking of the progressive Montana Supreme Court, we had a decision about a year ago in a Planned Parenthood case where the court in Montana determined that a minor could receive an abortion without their parents' consent. And at issue in that case was fundamental parental rights juxtaposed with a minor's rights in Montana. And which one would win in that battle? According to the Montana Supreme Court, the minor's rights trump. And I think right now we're seeing a push in Montana and other states for fundamental parental rights. and ensuring that parents have a right to send their kids to the school they want to send them to, have a right to bring them up in the way that is in accordance with their faith. What sort of federal efforts are underway to protect children and ensure that fundamental parental rights are preserved?
Well, just thinking about this battle against the woke agenda throughout our country uh, in protecting our children, I remember the President Trump signed an executive order protecting our girls
Yes.
and young women from men who want to play in women's sports. That was a big win for the issue of safety
Yeah.
for our young one. We're parents of 4 children, 2 daughters. I think about my daughters should never ever be on the same athletic court or playing battlefield. They're playing against a man. I mean, it's outrageous, not to mention what could happen in the locker room and the restrooms. I mean, this is just a fundamental safety issue as well as a fairness issue. This was a big win. And it was good to see the NCAA then, of course, follow suit as well. In fact, I led a letter to the International Olympic Committee urging them to do the same. But that was one very positive step. And then
Yeah.
just to go after this very, very tragic and horrible, these sex change and hormone therapies for minors. Look, that's child abuse. And what's remarkable is the contradiction of the woke and the left agenda, where if a child's in school and they want to take an aspirin, it takes parental consent. But if they want to get an abortion, it doesn't. And that is just something that just exposes the radical ideology of the left and how when they wake up in the morning, I've always said that the woke left, they worship a trinity, but their trinity is the LGBTQ agenda. That's one. The second part of the trinity is climate change, and the third part of the trinity is abortion. And it seems like everything they look through through that lens of the LGBTQ agenda, climate change, and abortion. And they take that lens as they look through every policy item here, whether it's in Washington or even back in Montana. That's the battle we face right now.
Yes, Senator. I really appreciate that analogy and that trinity. I've distilled it down even further because I'm a very simple man. I think it's just a matter of life versus death. Even back to the time of Moses, we've set before us two choices, life and death, and you talk about that trinity, and death is central to each one of those corners of that trinity. You have death in the LGBT movement because you're sterilizing people from God's first commandment to go forth and multiply. You have death in abortion, ending the life of a child, and then climate change. I mean, ultimately, the ends of that is death of the human race to preserve Mother Earth. And death is central. And on our side, we embrace life. We cherish life, and so I appreciate that we're viewing things in very much the same way. Chemical abortion pills, Senator, I think they make up nearly half of all, if not more, abortions provided in the country and in Montana. They're readily accessible. You can order them online and have them shipped to your house. And then you have women with a do-it-yourself abortion kit in their homes. Serious complications can result, and not to mention the possibility for abuse of those mail order abortions, where you have boyfriends or partners that are spiking drinks with these pills for their girlfriends who are pregnant. I mean, it's tragic and terrible. What's going on at the federal level to put an end to sending abortion pills through the mail?
Well, first of all, let me make one very clear statement. We think about the abortion pills and specifically mifepristone. of the harm it has to the baby. I mean, it kills the baby. So that's very clear. That's the intent of the pill, to kill the baby. But what's not talked about enough is the harm to the woman. So we talk a lot about the harm to the baby, as we should, but we need to talk more about the harm to the women, the harmful effect of mifepristone to women. So there's very, very reliable data looking at literally outcomes in emergency rooms, in hospitals, looking at insurance claims and medical records of tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of medical incidents. The conclusion was that mifepristone has an adverse effect for 1 in 10 women. And adverse means generally having to go to the emergency room, usually because of bleeding and so forth. And by the way, that's 22 times higher than what the FDA advertises and puts on the label on mifepristone. So there's a massive disconnect between what's actually happening to women with mifepristone in the field versus what the FDA put on the warning label on the pill itself. So the science is very clear. Mifepristone is harmful to women. And yet abortion advocates who claim to care so much about women's health are ignoring that data and instead promoting this pill that's, of course, we know very harmful to the baby, but very harmful to women. So I've made my concerns very clear to the FDA that they need to embrace this data that's been shared with the FDA now, and they will do their own independent study that I think is going to yield a similar kind of result. But they haven't been moving fast enough for my liking, and I want them to be moving faster, get the study completed, and make sure that women understand the true harm of mifepristone is not just to the baby, but to women.
Yeah, that is fascinating, Senator. One other area that we're examining, and I wonder if maybe this is happening at the federal level. You talk about the harms to the child, the harms to the woman. These pills, mifepristone and chemical abortion pills, contain forever chemicals, and there have been some limited studies on our water supply systems in a couple cities to see how these forever chemicals enter into our waterways after they're flushed down the toilet and enter our sewer system and our waterways. And what these studies have found is that at least in one major U.S. city, over the course of 9 months, if you were to ingest the water from that city, you would have the clinical dosage of mifepristone that's necessary to kill a child. And I found that startling. I don't know if there's any federal studies going on to see what's going on with the forever chemicals, and they are forever. They're staying in our waterways, but I think that's one of those unintended consequences that the abortion care industry didn't think about when they're sending out these pills all over the country.
Well, one of the primary responsibilities of the Food and Drug Administration is to ensure the safety of drugs that have been approved by the FDA and currently used by the American people. So let's start with, I think, the lowest hanging fruit here, which is mifepristone, where the actual data from the field, from actual trial from women, is showing it's 22 times more harmful what the FDA is advertising on the pill itself. So let's start there and make sure that women understand the harm to them as a result of taking mifepristone.
Yes. Senator, I want to ask you some questions about faith in the halls of the Capitol. I lobby up at the Capitol here in Helena, and you can feel it palpably, the spiritual battle that takes place when you're arguing over a contentious bill. You can feel God's presence in certain corners of the Capitol when you stop and pray with the legislator. I'm curious. Do you feel God's presence there in Washington, D.C., at least from time to time? What's going on there in Washington, and how do you keep a strong faith?
Well, the answer is yes. And I think it will encourage listeners to know that every Tuesday morning here in Washington, when we're in session at 8 a.m. for 1 hour, there's a U.S. Senate Bible study. We have about 8 to 10 U.S. senators who attend regularly, and it's real Bible study. As I've joked, sometimes Bible studies can turn into just times of sipping on coffee and chatting and not actually doing Bible study. I call it just cussing and discussing kind of a fellowship instead of actually studying the Bible. Well, this is in-depth Bible study. In fact, right now we're studying the book of Galatians. This week we're in a few verses of Galatians 2. Very important. We think about Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament. Much of what he wrote was correcting doctrinal error of the early church. And just a reminder that we need to stand for truth. But the question is, where is the source of truth? Well, the source of truth is the Bible. God's revealed that to us. And that's why we always have to be working as diligently as we can to be accurate in our theology, in our doctrine, and according to what the Bible says. But it's a wonderful time. It's bipartisan, Republicans, and we have a Democrat that attends as well, which is wonderful, and faithful attendance. And it spans. We have Catholics, we have Protestants, and so it's a wonderful group. And that's just, I think, hopefully will encourage listeners to know that happens. And the same thing happens in the House each week. And the same thing happens with members of Trump's cabinet and governors. Governor Gianforte, by the way, is part of the same. It's called Capitol Ministries. And so there's three separate Bible studies: a Senate Bible study, a House Bible study, and then a cabinet level and governors. They've combined that Bible study as well, and that's happening every week.
Well, that is encouraging. And I guess I'm just out of curiosity, Senator, this happens no matter who is president.
Oh yeah, I've been part of this study since I first came to the Senate, so that's nearly 12 years. And we were active under Obama. We were active under Trump 45. We were active under Biden and active under Trump 47. So it doesn't matter who the president is. This Bible study continues.
Oh, that's good to hear. It gives credence to those bumper stickers that say, it doesn't matter who the president is, Jesus Christ is king.
That's a fundamental truth.
Yes. Just a couple questions for you, Senator, on housing affordability. Housing prices in Montana are just skyrocketing everywhere, not just in Bozeman and Missoula and Billings, everywhere. Housing affordability is a real issue in Montana as it is in other states. What's going on at the federal level to address housing affordability and just trying to ensure that prices don't get completely out of control?
Yeah, well, they're about completely out of control in Montana. And I say that as someone who grew up in the home building business. So I went from kindergarten all the way through college in Bozeman. Went to Bozeman High School. I went to Longfellow grade school there in Bozeman and so forth. But my dad and my mom were home builders. In fact, my dad built many of the homes in Bozeman back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So my summers when I was working during my high school years and my college years in Bozeman, my summer jobs was working construction. So I've been involved in the home building business as a family business for many, many years, and I've watched the prices increase going way back. And now today, certainly in a place like Bozeman, which is just almost in its own separate league, with the median home price in Bozeman is nearly $1 million now, which I never, ever would have dreamed seeing that as a kid growing up. So some things we need to do to address that. One is to get interest rates lowered so that mortgage rates come down. It's good to see the Fed's brought the Fed rate down by two reductions of a quarter point each in the last few months. That's a good start. Under President Biden, mortgages were over 7%. Now we're seeing mortgages drop. We're about 6.25. Hopefully we'll get to 5 and change here pretty soon. That's one way to help on affordability, just get the cost of lending down. Second is to address the problems we have in Montana, which is we have too many liberal environmental groups that litigate our timber harvests. Every time we try to get out and do some responsible thinning of trees, reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfires, providing jobs for loggers and sawmills, we get litigated by these radical environmental groups. We have about 130 million board feet of timber in Montana tied up in litigation. One way to lower the price of materials is have a stronger supply. If we could get more logging in Montana, it not only reduces the risk of wildfire and provides jobs, it actually protects wildlife and fish by removing silt that gets part of a wildfire. It singes the earth and we get silt when the rains come and so forth. So it's good for wildlife, but importantly, it lowers building material costs. So we're working on some fronts there on forest management reform, as well as judicial reform. We talked about the state Supreme Court. What we're doing here to reform, of course, the Supreme Court and the circuit courts and the federal district judge is very important. In Montana, we just got Bill Mercer put on the bench. That's a Trump appointee replacing an Obama appointee. We're going to have another federal district judge in Montana, an Obama appointee replaced by a Trump appointee sometime in 26. So that's all progress moving in the right direction, getting better judges as well as better laws as it relates to forest management.
Yes, and we're very thankful for Judge Mercer. I mean, he stepped in, and I know he's already working furiously with a massive caseload, and very thankful for his appointment and confirmation. So
I knew Bill Mercer in high school. Bill was a Billings West Golden Bear, and I was a Bozeman Hawk. And we actually debated each other in competitive high school debate when I was a senior in high school. So Bill,
we got to know who won.
Bill, well, I'll let Mercer tell you. But we've been friends for a long, long time, and it was my honor to recommend Bill Mercer to President Trump. You know, President Trump makes the ultimate nomination, but he takes the recommendation from the federal delegation. And this is, again, an example of a win for Tim Sheehy and myself, because when John Tester was back here, John and I couldn't come to agreement on a judge to recommend to fill the slot. So I put a hold on it. So we're going to wait till after the election. And thankfully, Tim Sheehy won and President Trump won. And that's why we have Bill Mercer today.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, I think there are exciting things on the horizon for the state of Montana, and it's always good to be hopeful. Obviously, we have hope in Christ, but we also have hope for the state of Montana and for a return to embracing traditional values, protecting families. Senator, I just want to ask, kind of in closing, what else should we know about the work that's going on in Washington, D.C. to make Montana a wonderful place to raise children and have a strong family?
I'll tell you, one of the really important policy outcomes here this year with President Trump and a Republican Senate, Republican House was passing that working families tax cut bill, lowering taxes on waiters and waitresses, those in the service industry, on tax on tips.
Yes.
Removing taxes for senior citizens on Social Security, raising the death tax exemption so that Montana families can pass on their farms and ranch operations to the next generation or their family businesses without the fear of the federal tax man there with his hand asking for half of the estate. These are some really big wins that are very family friendly for Montanans that will put more money in the pockets of these families that are struggling financially in so many ways. And this allows them to have more of the money to invest in their families, and their future instead of the federal government taking it away from them. So that was a big win, something we fought for. I was very active in those debates back here in Washington, working with President Trump and the Republicans to get that positive outcome. That's a big win for Montana families.
That is a huge win. And it sparked one more question from me, Senator, and it's a curiosity of mine. I've seen some hints from President Trump that he wants to do away with income tax, and we're getting enough money through the tariff system that we can just abolish the IRS and get rid of income tax. Is that just a dream, or is that something that could be a reality, Senator?
Well, I mean, if we could ever abolish the IRS and income tax, that'd be a wonderful thing. But I haven't unpacked the numbers. I was a chemical engineer when I graduated from Montana State. That was my degree. So I'm a numbers guy at heart. So I'd like to explore the numbers there. I like the aspirations of President Trump there, but we've got to make sure we make all those numbers work as well. So, but thank God for President Trump, who wants to see more limited government, lower taxes, conservative judges, aligned with the values that we believe on here in this podcast. And it's just an honor to serve alongside President Trump and my Republican colleagues back here in Washington, moving these policies forward.
Well, Senator, I just want to thank you for standing strong for families, Montana families, standing strong for traditional values, and strong in your faith. Thank you for joining us this morning on the podcast. I just really appreciate it. It's such an honor and a privilege to talk with you. I know you have a busy schedule.
God bless your efforts there back home in Montana. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. God bless you. Well, on behalf of the Montana Family Foundation and the Family Matters podcast, I want to thank you for joining us. If you like this video and you want to see more of it, please be sure to like and subscribe and follow us for more.